Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the invitation for me to be here today. Let me take you to the world of the arts. I'm an artist based in Holland, and I've been working for the last 2 years doing research on the memory of the hands. So you will be asking why we have been talking all day about technology, and now I'm taking you back to the 19th century where the making was so important, and I think the making is still very important, and it was in the process of making, of creating, that I came across several interesting questions which come to the point of the neuroscience or biology or psychology or theories of learning. So I've been trying to find out what is the moment when we can say, I can do it. I've learned a craft, or even I can write Chinese. I've learned to write Chinese, or I've learned to do some knitting, or so the moment when you acquire a skill, usually when you set up yourself to learn something, you have to concentrate quite a lot, and it's a very mental process where you know that this is the first step, this is the second step, this is the third step, and you repeat it very often so that you are able to, in this case, make a pot. I would like to tell you how I came to this question. This pot is now ready, and I would like to ask you to put the next final. So in my artistic practice, I often make works assembled by smaller handmade pieces. And during that work process, this work is a porcelain installation made out of 740 pieces, which first I tried to do in 3D porcelain, but the technique at the time wasn't able to produce these smaller, very thin pieces. This resembles crochet, a thematic which I like to include in my work, so a combination of techniques that resemble each other and still are something else. To be able to do this, I had to develop a technique. First of all, with the material, with the porcelain, in a combination, in a kind of a recipe, with paper, and I had to exercise. So, of course, the first ones were wrong, were not correctly done, and a lot of concentration and silence was needed. The exercise of taking this bottle with a liquid of porcelain and again making the same movement to get almost the same pieces which I needed for my installation made me realize that the first 10, let's say, I had to look at it very accurate and really concentrate. But after I had made 50, I realized that I was not thinking about it anymore, that I was not making that work, that I was guided by my hand. And I was like, oh my God, you know, it's not me. My hand has learned it. The knowledge is acquired here. It's here because the pressing of the bottle was something which nobody could tell me how hard. And I knew, I could feel in my hand, it was here, that knowledge. So I experienced that like it was my hand which had acquired the knowledge, the intelligence, and the memory, because I could repeat it again and again without thinking. So I thought, if the memory is here, if the knowledge is acquired here and not in my head, how can I analyze this moment when the turning point comes that it's not me, but it is my hand, that it is my own point, my own knowledge. So I set myself to learn wheel throwing. And of course I had a tutor who taught me how to wheel throw. And I filmed that, and I tried to make a scientific research out of it. So I had been inquiring how to do artistic research, how to observe what are the right questions to put to be able to learn about my skills. So that was quite an interesting process, and I realized there are so many theories, and science and neuroscience has been discovering quite a lot, but still there is a world which is not yet known. And one of the things I came across is the theory of Polanyi, a biologist who became a philosopher who has a theory about tacit knowledge. And first of all, as you can see, I wrote a recipe about how to throw a pot. I can give you this recipe at the end of the lecture, and please do try it home. Very soon you will realize that you are not able to make a pot, because if I am not going to teach you, if I don't give you a direct tutorial, or if you observe and experience the clay in your hands, in the end of maybe reading these 1,000 times, you have not yet made a pot. So Mr. Polanyi developed a theory saying that you can only acquire this skill in connection to the material. So you are not able to say that you can cycle if you have never been on a bicycle. I can give you a recipe how to cycle, but after you read the instructions how to cycle, you are not yet able to cycle unless you exercise it. So all these words in red are words which actually imply the activity of the exercise, or they are subjective. If I say press in my recipe, you don't know how much you have to press. If I say speed up the wheel, you will not know how much you have to speed up the wheel. So he says the matter, the material, the real experience in doing, you need that before you can say you can learn it. But then I was confronted with the fact that I have experienced that my hands had the memory. So I thought, Mr. Polanyi, I'm sorry, I think there is more about it. So if I can do the wheel throwing, and if my hand has learned it, I can repeat the movements like the friend of mine, this potter, has done without the clay. He put into sequence all the movements I need. So even without the clay, I made an invisible, or he made an invisible 3D pot. My teacher told me that I would probably need to make 100 pots before I was able to say that I can wheel throw a pot. And I realized through all the process that there is much more going on. So for instance, the centering of the clay on wheel throwing is an activity which is really very, very difficult. If you ever see potters making a pot, you don't realize how difficult it is to know that the clay is in the center. Another difficulty is if you are stressed. So I wanted to acquire pot number 100, and I realized that by pot 95, as you can see in my row, this will be the last one. And here was a disaster because I knew that pot number 100 would be here. This is 105. So wanting to execute in perfection made me anxious and made me go wrong. This is what I call the choreography of the hands. So throughout the exercise and that's a known process as well from sporters who are going to do the jump. You see them concentrating and you see them doing the movement before they do it. So also surgeons, I've heard, exercise with their hands and concentrate before they do something very difficult and specific in their work. So this is the film of the Ferrand. This is a project I presented in my master study last summer, together with a film which is on the back. I interviewed a potter, a philosopher who speaks about the theory of the affordances, and a neuroscientist. And I put them exactly the same question to all of them. I didn't show them the interviews to each other, but I explained, as I explained to you, I was making these and suddenly my hands have memory. Do my hands have memory? How do you experience that as a potter? What do you know from philosophy or from the theory of affordances or the neuroscientist? Can you tell me how it comes? The interesting thing is that although they hadn't seen each other's interview, some things came very close to each other, and other points were totally opposite. What I realize and what I think is most interesting is that there is not yet a solution. So at the end of this research, I only gathered more questions. And talking today in terms of technique, I would love to set up a research of how a robot would make the perfect pot. And of course you can tell me, well, with 3D we can make you a pot, no problem. But that's not the point, because the craftsman and we all know that an object which has been made by hand has a certain quality, a certain beauty, which we love, let's say. And a 3D printed pot, you can make 100 and they will be the same. But this moment when the hand indeed, in the dialogue with the clay, if it is too wet or maybe a little bubble of air or maybe a little stone, this moment when the hand with its intelligence or memory, of course together with the brain, I will not deny that, but this moment when the hand and the creativity, the creative spirit takes the decision, oh, this is not going to become a pot because something is going wrong, you know what, I will make a bowl. And the moment that, the magic moment that something turns into something else. And I think you scientists and biologists, makers, engineers, we are all looking to new questions and new solutions. And I can imagine at the end of this day, I was listening to all of you and getting inspired. I would love to see in some years some 3D print object for a kind of memory disk or something, a USB, which I could put in my hand to have more memory to, you know, who knows, will some of you be inspired by this talk today? And if you happen to know more about the memory of the hands, or maybe being producing at the moment robots like Joe has been telling us this morning, I would love to get in contact and to go into the adventure to create something new. Thank you very much.